Anxiety is the what if condition. It is about the
Mm-hmm.
future. You're fearing something that's going to happen and you're worried about it, or the act of going through those thoughts, that worrying process, is triggering this alarm mechanism which we have, which is called the fight or flight response. And so our bodies get keyed up, rightly so, because it thinks that we're going to be in imminent physical danger. There's a threat.
Welcome to the Soaring Child Podcast, where parents of children with ADHD learn tips and tricks to help their child soar at home, at school, and in life. We feature interviews with experts, medical professionals, and parents just like you who are learning how to reduce ADHD symptoms using food and other natural strategies. Because children with ADHD deserve to soar just like every other child. I'm your host, Dana Kay. Hello, parents. This is Dana Kay here with another edition of the Soaring Child Podcast. Have you ever felt that truly terrifying feeling of your heart racing, that rapid pulse, your chest tightening? Maybe you felt faint and feeling like you were sick to the stomach. As an adult, that feeling is so scary, and I have been through it multiple times, but I can't even imagine what that would feel like for a child. Panic attacks are truly terrifying and can happen without warning or reason, causing that sudden fear and extreme anxiety. So that's what we're talking about today on the podcast. Today's guest is an educator and licensed clinical psychologist for over 35 years. She was a pioneer in blending functional medicine principles with positive psychology, cognitive behavioral therapy, and mind-body medicine. She is the author of Stop Panic Attacks in 10 Easy Steps. She also trains people to become functional medicine health coaches because she believes that growing the health coaching profession will be the solution to combating chronic disease and reducing healthcare costs. As the founder and CEO of the Functional Medicine Coaching Academy, a collaboration with the Institute of Functional Medicine, Sandra is a leader in the field of health coaching education. Now it's time to welcome Sandra Scheinbaum to the Soaring Child. Hi, Sandra. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, it is a pleasure to be here.
No, I'm really excited to get to chat with you today. You know, some of your history and what you've been doing really sort of comes close to my heart because I can tell you that I used to suffer from panic attacks many years ago, and I suffered from anxiety. And so I'm really excited about having this conversation and letting our audience really know what to do when that happens. I'm just going to dive in. You know, obviously we're speaking to families of kids with ADHD, and I wanted to ask you, do you have a personal journey with ADHD?
Oh, do I ever? Yes. Yeah, I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, I was one of those kids who was easily distracted, and I was the daydreamer. And
Mm,
often girls are missed with ADD, and they are the inattentive type, and they're more of the spacey daydreamers. And that was me. But then when I became a psychologist and started studying positive psychology long before it had a name, I really did an about face and started focusing on the strengths, because my other association with ADHD, in addition to personal, is that was my career for many years. I ran a clinic for children and adults with learning disabilities and
mhm.
ADD, and had thousands of kids that I had tested over the years, and both as when I was in learning disabilities as a clinician, as well as then as a psychologist. I did whole batteries of tests, and
Mm.
so a lot of experience with kids and adults with ADD. And now what I focus on is a strengths approach.
A strengths approach, so really diving into looking at what each child's strengths are. Is that what you mean?
Yes. So often when kids are diagnosed with ADD, well, let's start with how they come to be diagnosed. Often it's the teacher. at a parent conference that says, no, he's that doesn't seem to be paying attention, or he's, he's running around a lot, or she's just seems to be really distracted and a hard time completing their assignments or worksheets on time. And this can start really young. I've heard this even in preschool, where kids are, their parents are being told, I think better check this out. I suggest you go to the pediatrician and see if he or she has ADD. So goes to the doctor, and then the doctor is relying on the teacher. Well, why do you think why are you here for this evaluation? And the teacher thinks, he's not paying attention and has trouble with just, being out of seat a lot, and is talking out of turn. And there's a whole checklist. And so, yes. And so then the doctor says, okay, well, let's try them on some Ritalin. And if they respond, then we know that's the diagnosis. I cannot tell you how many kids were diagnosed that way. And then it just went on for years and years. They had this label. And as a diagnostician, what I would do, because I was trained, my master's was in learning disabilities. And so I was trained in this very extensive evaluation that looks at, okay, and it's very similar in retrospect, looking back to what I do now, which is in functional medicine, it is really remarkably similar. In other words, could be one symptom, like distracted or hyperactive, but it could be a multitude of causes. Definitely. So we'd start with acuity. Well, what's their hearing or their vision? You could look ADD because you can't hear or see well. Then what about the ability to perceive things? You could have difficulty in subtle differences in sound perception, visual perception. So again, learning is going to be hard. You're going to be distracted, and again, those symptoms will show up. Or it's going to at the level of memory. So we're going higher up the ladder of cognitive processing. So the next level is memory. Well, maybe you just can't remember the sounds, and so that is going on. And again, what is that looking like? If you're a child, you may be easily distracted. And then in terms of language, difficulty understanding language and higher level reasoning. So you go through all those, and you also look at environmental factors. What's the classroom like? Is it chaotic? Is it more of an open style classroom and not real structured? What's the home environment like? Is it chaotic or not really structured, or too structured? The child's rebelling. Is there stress at home? Is there divorce or other things going on with the other siblings? So you look at all of these factors, plus now with functional medicine, we're also looking at the microbiome. What's the health of the gut? What's this child eating? What's their movement like? What's their friendship relationships like? So all of those things play into it.
Yes, and you're speaking to my heart for sure. The amount of times I've spoken to families that have been diagnosed from the pediatrician, and the pediatrician is not trained to diagnose ADHD, and they simply look at a checklist and go, yes, your child has ADHD. And so one of the things that I talk about a lot is, if you are going to go down the diagnosis path, to make sure that you go to a trained psychiatrist or psychologist who specifically diagnoses ADHD. And unfortunately, a lot of the time, those really detailed diagnoses do come out of pocket and can be quite expensive, but it is definitely worth it. So Sandra, I talk a lot about what are those underlying reasons that could be contributing to ADHD, and I love how you laid it out there of all those different levels and what families should do to be looking at all those different levels. Anxiety comes a lot with ADHD, and I know that you do a lot of coaching around anxiety and panic attacks, and so if you don't mind, I'd love to sort of steer the conversation down that path, because we haven't really talked about that a lot. How common do you think it is with as a side-by-side diagnosis with ADHD?
Remarkably common, and it's often what comes first. And it's rather than wasting time trying to figure that out, you treat both. And it is, think about somebody who is struggling because they're impulsive, and that's one of what that goes along with this cluster of symptoms that we're calling ADD or ADHD. It's acting without thinking, acting on impulse, acting impulsively. So I can't tell you how many times I have messed up things, like if anything that is detailed step-by-step instructions. So early, many years, I used to sew. And the other part of ADD is that you always want to like get things done quickly. Again, checking your work, anything that's too detailed or get bored easily. So they would recommend in sewing that you baste it first, that you create it first as a kind of a sample. You work out the kinks. Not me. In true ADD fashion, I would just jump in, even if it was a really good, like a silk fabric. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and, whoops, I sewed that sleeve in wrong. Oops, I didn't pay attention to the directions well enough. And what's the result of that? Well, you start to have anxiety because you are anxious about screwing up. You're fearing making a mistake, whether that's in a project like I've just described, whether that is when you're about to give a talk, whether it is in taking a test in school, because again, these kids may have that situation where they make dumb mistakes. They're not paying attention, they don't read the fine print, and they get the answer wrong. So now they're anxious about it. And so that is one of the biggest reasons that people with ADD tend to be anxious, because they're worrying about screwing up because they've had a history where they acted impulsively. They said the wrong thing, for example, and perhaps they blurted something out, or they lost their temper, and now somebody was upset at them. And so they're then anxious about it. So that is the connection. So anxiety is the what if condition. It is about the future. You're fearing something that's going to happen, and you're worried about it, or the act of going through those thoughts, that worrying process, is triggering this alarm mechanism which we have. It's just called the fight or flight response. And so our bodies get keyed up, rightly so, because it thinks that we're going to be in imminent physical danger. There's a threat. So in this case, in what I just described, what if I mess up on something? What if I have a test tomorrow, and what if I just make a lot of mistakes on that, and this is important for my future career, let's say. And so what happens is you are not in the present moment. So in the present moment, you're not taking that exam. Perhaps you're studying, perhaps you have a thought about it. And so the key to when you experience anxiety, recognize that that's what if, is you bring yourself back to the present tense, and that you're in the present moment, because you can feel it's a sensory awareness. Oh, I feel like I'm taking a breath. I can see, I can hear, I can touch, I can feel. And so you anchor yourself in the present. And then there's many different strategies for letting go of that what if. One way is to say, so what if? All right. So what if I do this, this, and this? I make a mistake. I get there late. I get lost, or whatever it might be. And imagine that happening. And imagine yourself dealing with it, and imagine yourself dealing with it at that point. And then what about 5 years from now? Will you even remember that experience? What about 10 years? What's the importance of it? And so you walk that through. And these are techniques from cognitive behavior therapy, where you're bringing a rational thought process to whatever it is you're upsetting yourself about, because that is in the future. And even I used to get really, really severe panic attacks, to the point where I had to go to the emergency room because I thought I was dying. I thought I couldn't breathe. I was having a heart attack. Yes. And of course, what happened was I was hyperventilating. So it's another way to deal with that extreme form of anxiety, when your body has now gone into a panic mode. And what happens is you tend to be struggling with breath. You're hyperventilating. You're so focused on, I can't breathe. I need more air, that you keep inhaling and you're not taking the time to fully exhale. And that's why people are told to breathe into a paper bag, which is what I was told to do. And so it's trusting the process that slowly the body will return to a normal state. Because with panic, with anxiety, we get charged up quickly. We have to. It's like a home alarm, and you have to respond quickly because the body thinks you're in danger. So getting out of it, getting back into a normal response, that takes time. And many people are not patient to allow that process to unfold.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. When I used to suffer from anxiety, I used to suffer quite strongly in my early 20s. Right now, I don't, because I know the power of the gut. I know the power of food. I know all of this holistic side of things, and so I've been lucky enough to sort of be able to, heal my body to get out of that. But I used to actually have panic attacks relating to vomiting, and the thought of vomiting would actually send me into a panic attack. And we know the gut brain connection is huge, and when we feel nervous and anxious, it affects our gut and makes us feel nauseous. And so it was this vicious cycle for me. But I do love the thought that one thing really stood out to me with what you said, and that was, what's going to happen in 5 years from now? Okay, if I do vomit now, that's okay. In 5 years, I won't even remember it. It will be so quick and brief, and I'll get over it. I love that, and that, I think that is a fantastic tip to teach someone. No one had actually ever said that to me, but I think that would have helped dramatically in thinking, in 5 years I won't even remember this. And so, what are some tips when someone is in a panic attack? How do they stop it? What are those tips from you?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's very common when you're in panic, like you were worried about vomiting. You're worried about some physical response. I can't breathe. I have no breath. Therefore, I'm going to die. I
Mm.
had been, this was in my 20s when I remember had one day a really bad panic attack, and I was out shoveling snow. It was a big snowstorm in the Chicago area. And so I decided, and I was not in shape. I did not exercise at that point. So I go out and I'm shoveling. So I come back in the house and, oh, you can have a heart attack. Because that's what they always said in the news. Like, be careful when you're shoveling snow. A lot of people have had heart attacks doing that. So, and okay, the body is so quick. It was such a fierce thought. Like, oh my God, I could have a heart attack. Well, suddenly I had pain, literally felt pain going down my left arm. Wait, that's a sign of a heart attack.
Wow.
Now I can't breathe. I'm going to pass out. I better call the paramedics. Keeps escalating more and more and more to, it's like danger, danger, danger is what your thinking brain, like flashing alarm.
Mm.
The body, the lower brainstem, which responds intelligently. Of course, your heart has to beat faster because you're thinking is sensing danger. You have to either fight or run away. That takes a lot. So your heart beats faster, your muscles change, you lose sensation in your fingertips because all the blood is redirected to your large organ muscles so you can fight or run away. So this whole cascade of responses. And how do you stop it? Get your rational thinking brain going. And the first step is to say, this is panic. My body is responding intelligently. It's like if you do have a home alarm at home, you accidentally pressed, we have an alarm, it goes direct to the police or fire. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You accidentally leaned on that, it goes off. And now the emergency crews, there's all these emergency vehicles, they're all on their way, sirens blaring. Well, they're not just going to turn around and go back, right? They have to check out every nook and cranny on your property. Or if it's an apartment building, you've got all the neighbors going. And so what happens is when you start to think, okay, I've triggered the panic response. I'm going to wait patiently till it subsides. In other words, you start to reverse the process. What can I do? usually with a panic attack, you're like gasping for your air, or you're panting, or you're not breathing at all. So you start to put your hands on your belly and you start taking belly breaths. You
Mm-hmm.
start slowing it down on purpose. Then you may notice, oh, my shoulders are up to my ears. I'm going to just let them go. I'm going to relax them. I'm going to focus on, maybe every time I exhale, I'm going to imagine more and more of this yucky sensation is going. You can also focus on, again, you keep saying to yourself, safety, because we have it's like a sorting system. There are only two buckets: safety, danger.
Mm.
Everything we think, everything we interpret is either going to go in the safety or danger pile. So if it is, I'm dying, this is awful, why do I have these panic attacks? This is terrible, this shouldn't be happening, I'm always going to be this way. Maybe I'm crazy. Do I need to see a psychiatrist for medication? All that is in the danger bucket. And it's at some level triggering it or keeping it going. The safety is, soon I'll feel better. I have patience. What am I going to do while I calm myself? Well, often it is distraction. Distraction is really powerful. So just turning on the TV, for example, or going for a walk may not help because you're still distracted by the sensation of being in a panic mode. But what if you got involved in something that was really distracting? Like maybe you pull out a hard recipe that you're going to cook, or
Mm.
you're going to do. I had a woman many years ago when I was a practicing psychologist, and she had very severe debilitating panic attacks. And she would call me and she'd say, "Oh, Dr. Sandy, I can't take it. I don't know what I'm gonna do. I gotta go, I'm going to the emergency room." And I would say, "Seal, what closet can you clean out right now?" And okay, all right, I'll go to this back bedroom, and haven't looked at okay. She would call an hour later and she'd say, "I feel better. I got so involved." This was an elderly woman. "I got so involved and I found an old scrapbook and I was looking at it and I was having a
Ah,
laugh." Okay, it was the distraction,
yes.
because now her mind is filled with something else that's not related to this turning inward. How am I feeling? My heart's racing, I'm having trouble breathing, my stomach's upset, or I'm a
Mm-hmm.
fear, what if I vomit? She's focusing on that activity of of pulling out these items, and it's distracting. So
I love
talking with
that.
someone, even doing math problems, or
Mm-hmm. That'll
playing a
probably distract me.
yeah.
Yeah, so let's just quickly recap. We've got talking about that we're currently in a panic, so we want to say to ourselves safety. Think about, what's this going to be in 5 years? It's going to be gone. We want to take deep belly breaths. We want to focus on our in breath and our out breath. We want to roll our shoulders down and reduce all the tension from our shoulders, and we want to focus on doing an activity that will take our focus away from the panic and bring us into that safety mode.
Yes, because it often feels debilitating, feels like it'll never end, it feels
Mm-hmm.
dangerous.
Yeah.
And you may be thinking, how can I distract myself? I mean, all my attention is focused on how bad I feel.
Mm-hmm.
But it happens. It,
Mm-hmm.
it happens. And if you have a child and they might be in a temper tantrum mode one moment, and then they see a toy, they see something else, or they see their friend, and it's like it never happened. That's what we
Mm.
want.
Yeah, no, I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Now, you've gone from being a traditional psychiatrist to coming more into the functional medicine realm. So tell me a little bit about that. What are your suggestions on what families can do if their child is suffering from anxiety in terms from a functional standpoint?
Sure. So I was working as a health psychologist. That was
Mm-hmm.
my field. And then I founded the Functional Medicine Coaching Academy. And that is based on applying functional medicine principles with positive psychology. So what you can do from a functional standpoint, first and foremost, is focusing on how your child flourishes and how you do. So when you're thriving, when things are going well, what strengths do you have? And how can you turn what maybe others have labeled or the formal scientific literature has labeled as a deficit into a strength? And so, what I learned in my life is that the symptoms that I was labeling ADD, it's zest. It's like it's just joy that is, but also it involves always moving. I'm standing right now. It
Mm.
is having this sense of zest and exuberance. And I did when I was getting my doctorate, I studied like it's psychic overexcitability, which is a good thing because it enables you to be creative, which is why just about all people who create things are ADD. Entrepreneurs, for example,
Mm-hmm.
are absolutely. So that goes hand in hand with the functional medicine principles, where you look at how you nurture yourself. So everything that you put in, toxic load, what can be an irritant, whether it's a food, whether it's a chemical from the environment or a chemical in food or in water, in the air. So you look at how much can you help your body, chiefly your gut, to function optimally. So are you giving the body the right nutrients that it needs? And let's look at that nutrient in a broad sense. So it's not just the foods, because you can struggle and food battles with kids aren't worth it. So you're looking at really a whole family approach that is, how can you have the most nourishment in that environment for you and for that child and for everyone else in the family? And that is emotional nourishment, joy around eating meals together, growing food together, however you interpret that, so that that individual, that child, feels cherished and loved and accepted for who they are. I've seen a lot of families where, oh, that's her food because she has the special gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free, and now everybody else's food. But really, you make it a family tradition.
Yes,
And
definitely. What that's one of the biggest things that I suggest to families that I work with is the ones that have the most success are the ones that change the family approach, do it all together. And it's surprising how everyone feels better. It's not just the
yes,
child with
yes,
ADHD or anxiety.
exactly.
So,
Yeah.
and when everyone changes together, it becomes the family's new normal. And it becomes easy when that happens.
Absolutely. And you don't have to go it alone. So we
Hmm.
are finding we have a lot of people who are studying to become health coaches, often
Hmm.
because they have dealt with this themselves, perhaps as a parent, and now they're going to help others. And that is one way to really help to have that coach by your side, as well as if to choose to, well, I want to be that individual that is now helping other families, because this is an epidemic. I've never seen so many people being diagnosed, and it's really important to normalize this, to not think that everybody has a mental, severe neurological disorder that'll be with them for life, and that there are ways that they can improve their functioning without going that route of the label and the disordered
Hmm.
approach.
Yeah, I love how you said that, and it brings me back to what I went through and what my business now does. And so I had a child that had ADHD. We went on a vicious cycle of all the medication, and now he's hasn't been on meds for years, and he's thriving in middle school. And every person that works in my business, except for maybe two, have gone through my program for their child. And so now they have got that passion. So tell
Yes.
me a little bit, for listeners out there, I know that we talk a lot about the what we can do to help our child, but I'd love for you to share with our listeners a little bit about what they could possibly do once they get through this and how they could help other people. And so tell me a little bit about your coaching academy and what that entails.
Sure. So we are a functional medicine coaching academy. I started the program in 2015 with our first beta class, and it's a collaboration with the Institute for Functional Medicine.
Hmm.
So I would highly recommend if you think your child has ADD or ADHD, or if they've been confirmed in this with this diagnosis, that there are doctors and other practitioners trained in functional medicine that will
Hmm.
go through this comprehensive evaluation and look at possible ways that you might not be aware of. So that's number one. And then what we do is train people to be health coaches. You don't need a background in healthcare, and there's a it's pretty low entry. In other words, people often say, "Gee, I'd love to go back and go to medical school or go become a psychologist," but that's like 8 years, 5 years, 6 years
Hmm.
of my life. Expensive, and it is just a lot of hard work and a lot of time and commitment. But the entry to health coach is a 12-month program that's all online. You get a certificate. We have people from over 60 countries in every state, and it is growing because there is such a need, and a need there. We have a doctor shortage. We have certainly a primary care doctor, a critical shortage, and health coaches. Even the AMA, American Medical Association, is saying health coaching is a viable option. They can support you. They don't diagnose, they don't treat. So if you think,
Hmm.
oh, I'd really like to do this, again, it is, if you're a good listener, if you've gone through it yourself, you have that empathy, you can help others so that they can have an easier time. And so we get people who have a mission to serve others, and they can do it. That coaching is increasingly remote, over Zoom. So it is very easy to incorporate if you have a family or even another job.
No, that's wonderful. And we haven't really sort of talked about that much on the podcast. So that's sort of why I took that took that down
Mhm.
that approach, because really it is when you have a child and you've been through this in your own journey, there is nothing more satisfying than being able to help other families.
Yeah.
When you know the pain and the suffering that they're going through, the empathy that can come from
Mhm.
that, but also knowing that there is hope for them, and
Yes.
sharing and showing them that there is hope. And the families are the perfect example of that, going from that pain to that happiness.
Yeah.
So that's wonderful.
And if I may say one other thing, because I just thought I want to talk about Sean. Sean is a father of a child with special needs. He's just graduating from FMCA, and his focus will be working with dads, helping dads. He's
Mm,
organizing groups for dads of kids with special needs because they're
mm.
often forgotten. They want to help, they don't know what to do. And so this is a focus that is his passion. And it's just such a wonderful story of how he transitioned from all the issues that he had as a dad, and not feeling confident that he could
Mm.
help his son. And now he's focusing as a health coach on working with other dads.
I love that. It's rare to have the dad involved in a lot of the stuff that I do, and probably out of a few hundred clients that we've got right at this moment, there's probably two dads or three dads that are in that group. And so I think providing a platform for the dad is wonderful. So I wish him the best of luck. Can we just quickly talk about the importance of support? I think it's critical, but I love your take on it.
It is so important to have support as a parent. Back when we were talking like this is early 1970s, when I had my first job as a learning disabilities teacher and ran a
Mm.
classroom. And that was before we even had a label for ADD. But believe me, those kids, would had those signs. And I started a group for parents to come in, and they would just being with one another. It's that feeling of I'm not alone. And often we feel as a parent, we can do it all. and we're afraid to ask for help. We also may be dealing with family issues, perhaps a criticizing mom or mother-in-law who are saying like, well, I don't understand this gluten. They'll sneak it in. For example, you're trying to make dietary changes, and then there is somebody who is presenting an obstacle, difficult to deal with, or perhaps there's stress, marital stress. So getting support is really helpful. Sometimes parents are torn apart. They don't see eye to eye on how to raise a child with special needs. And so seeking help, seeking couples counseling. I love the Gottman training that they do for couples. And so getting involved in that process and looking at having support, having a health coach, having a friend, having somebody that you can be totally honest with, and just share, just getting together. And then there's a greater level. So when I was teaching, and I used to teach people to become teachers of children with special needs, and they were very active in the parents that we worked with parent organizations on a national level. So that's another way that you feel needed, you feel useful, and you feel like you're really making a difference. But self-care on a very basic level is so, so important. That is probably the primary thing as a parent, to take care of yourself and then get that support, because they can help you with perspective. Getting back to the subject of anxiety, you may be worried that you're not doing it right as a parent and not good enough. And having the support where you can get confirmation, validation that what you are doing as a parent is good. It's all we can, at the end of the day, we're only good enough.
I think that support is absolutely critical. The feelings of loneliness that a family or a parent goes through when they have a child with challenges, a lot of the time don't realize that there are so many other families out there. And look, that's one of the missions of this podcast, is to make families realize that they're not alone and there is hope. Sandra, just before we finish up, I'd love you to share, one tip to families out there listening that can help their child soar.
Sure. I think that when they are strength spotting, so at the end of the day, have a strengths conversation. What strengths did you use today? And there's a nonprofit organization called the VIA, VIA, and they do research on character strengths, and they have free surveys. You have your child take that. I think so. If they're able to read and can interpret the questions, I think it's for I think like about 10 years, 9 or 10 might be, maybe a little younger, but you can read the questions if somebody's younger. And then you get a summary of their key signature strengths, what makes them them. And you ask how they used it today. How did you use hope? How did you use gratitude? How did you use forgiveness? Forgiveness is a really big one. Forgiving yourself if you made a mistake, and using those strengths every day. And then you take that as well. You take that via survey. They have the adult version, and you find your signature strengths. So whatever that may be. And I bet if your child has ADD, strengths are going to be zest, are going to be curiosity, are going to be creativity. Those typically land at the top.
I love that. And listeners, will definitely drop that link in the show notes. I will be going off after this episode to actually run that strength survey on my children and myself, and building it into your routine on a daily basis before dinner. What strengths did you use today? And then when you do that for a couple of weeks, it just becomes part of your new normal. Sandra, I think that is a wonderful tip for our listeners. Thank you so much for joining us today and just sharing your knowledge and your experience, your wide experience from both the functional side and from, the traditional psychiatry side of things as well. Please tell listeners where they can find and follow you online.
Sure. Well, they can go to functionalmedicinecoaching.org. On Instagram, I am Dr. Sandy and Functional Med Coach. And that would be the best places to follow me, and LinkedIn as well. And
Fantastic.
Sandra Scheinbaum.
Fantastic. Thank you once again for joining me, listeners. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of The Soaring Child. I'm Dana Kay, your ADHD health practitioner. Keep on thriving. Thank you for listening to the Soaring Child podcast today. To learn more about how to help your child with ADHD soar using natural strategies, visit our website at ADHDthriveinstitute.com and follow us on social media at ADHD Thrive Institute.